Today, Dr. Jessica Drew DePaz will be talking about depression, anxiety, and substance abuse in the mature population. During these challenging times, more people than ever are experiencing anxiety and depression and turning to alcohol and other substances to cope with life's challenges. Join us as they share evidence-based strategies to bolster our mental well-being. Together, we will explore how to meet difficult moments with a variety of stress management tools, including biofeedback, mindfulness, self-compassion, and urge surfing. Experimental exercises will be integrated throughout. We'll end with resources to continue to practice these skills and to stay connected during these times.
Thank you so much, Phil, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. So yes, as you said, I'll be talking about depression, anxiety, and substance abuse in the mature population, finding light in dark times. And Dr. Lee's very sorry that she can't be here with you today. She had a recent loss in her family. And so I really encouraged her to just take care of herself right now. So she was going to be really elaborating on the biofeedback part. And really this presentation will be focused a lot on mindfulness, which is, the program that I oversee at the Samueli Institute. So before we jump into, what this is and how we can use it, I just wanted to share, kind of really step back for a second and look at where we've been this last year, do maybe a 2020 recap. I won't belabor it because I know that we are still experiencing this in real time. But, we kicked off last year with a COVID-19 pandemic, which literally changed life as we knew it. We, witnessed a lot of anti-Black actions in the United States and watched or participated in Black Lives Matter demonstrations that spread throughout the world. We're in a recession. All of this amidst a backdrop of climate change that's really impacting everyone on the planet. And, we've just experienced perhaps the most divided presidential election in history. And this division in our country continues as we gear up for the inauguration. So this is a lot of stress that every person really in the world. I actually gave a talk recently and had people on in many different countries. And we were looking at this slide and realizing even the presidential election is really affecting people. Even our presidential election is affecting many people throughout the world. So it's pretty amazing that we are all really being impacted by this right now. And I just wanted to quickly share a chart that shows like typical emotional phases following a disaster. And I mean, many of, what I just shared on the previous slide are disasters, and a lot of them are chronic. They haven't ended. It wasn't like a one-day event, like an earthquake, right? It's, which I know can also continue on, but the effects of that. But I mean, many of these things we are just like living with. And, in a typical disaster, this is sort of a chart over a year with emotional highs and emotional lows. Sometimes there's a pre-disaster experience, a warning that something's coming. I mean, with the pandemic, maybe we knew that this was coming for a very short while. Then there might be a honeymoon phase. For me, that was, deciding I'm going to do all these wonderful things for my life while we're on lockdown, like get in great shape and learn how to cook and all this stuff that really didn't end up happening. But that was my honeymoon phase. And then there's disillusionment, really facing the reality of what's going on. And there's some significant emotional lows associated with that. I mean, this chart, I'm not saying it's like depicting what we're all going through. I'm just saying if this is the chart of one typical disaster, I mean, there's so much happening for all of us. If you're having a hard time, I want to normalize that, that this would be to be expected. Especially with all of these disasters that we've been facing and how chronic that they have been. And yes, it's having an impact on the mental health of people throughout the world, is what the research is finding, the early studies and surveys are finding. And of course, in the United States as well, that anxiety, stress, PTSD, depression, all of these things are really up right now. Here's a chart from the CDC really showing, some of the kind of big picture effect on our mental health. Anxiety has really tripled since the pandemic began, and depression has nearly quadrupled. But let's get, a little bit more into what's happening in the mature population. So, a quarter of older adults reported anxiety or depression in the midst of this pandemic. So this top, sorry about that. This top bar we see, whoa, excuse me, going a little crazy here. I'm trying to actually move the picture so I can see my chart better. But this top bar we see that overall, almost a quarter of older adults are reporting the anxiety or depression. But it also breaks it down by, when people live alone, that there's kind of an increased risk, and women are at 28%, and with Hispanics at 33%, and those with lower income at 37%, and those in fair or poor health at an even lower rate, or at higher rate at almost 50%. And really, when the pandemic started, we knew that this was that a group at great risk was the mature population, right? That not only for health concerns around COVID and disruptions to maybe access to care, sometimes maybe more difficulties accessing technologies like telemedicine. There were concerns that isolation would exacerbate mental health. Although I also did want to share that the survey results have been more nuanced than people expected. That actually, the group that has been having maybe reporting the highest rates of mental health difficulties have been youth. So across the board, it's the rates are high, but youth have about 40% mental health spikes right now. So there are also, I think some of the results are pointing to resilience in the mature population. I mean, a group facing really maybe some of the biggest stressors throughout this pandemic, but yet are showing some of the most resilience. So it might be interesting at the end of our talk, if I'd be curious if you have thoughts on maybe, this resilience, because I actually feel like we maybe have a lot to learn from the mature population. And should be looking to understand the resilience that's there, even though obviously we are all having a hard time with, or many of us are having a hard time with what's going on. The results are showing that older adults are doing well than some of the others. And so even, there's been a big concern about loneliness. And this particular survey, you can see it does break it out by age group. And you can see that that baby boomers actually are reporting, in this particular question was saying, do you feel more lonely because of the coronavirus? And that's highest with millennials, and lowest, with the baby boomers, but still high across the board, right? To have 20% or more to have at least 1 in 5 people walking around feeling lonely right now, clearly these are very high rates. And just a little bit on, seniors and substance abuse. Addiction among people 65 and up is often underestimated and underdiagnosed, which can prevent people from getting the help that they need. Alcohol and prescription drug use affects up to 17% of adults over the age of 60, according to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. And due to insufficient knowledge and limited research and hurried office visits, I think healthcare providers often overlook substance abuse among the elderly. And right now, alcohol and prescription drugs is one of the fastest growing problems in the United States, including among people over age 60. And also substance abuse, really throughout the pandemic, we are seeing that this is growing in all groups. So, clearly, these are dark times right now. But as Martin Luther King once said, only in the darkness can you see the stars. And, I'm sure we've all been asking ourselves at different times, where is the light and in all of this? For me, I often come back to an area of passion of mine that happens to be, I was pleasantly surprised when I looked at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They list 4 things as recommendations for anxiety and depression. And in addition to maybe mental health services when these are indicated, they recommend for preventative measures, healthy eating, physical activity, getting the recommended sleep. And they also recommend relaxation techniques and mindfulness. And I was kind of surprised to find mindfulness, pleasantly surprised to find mindfulness on their list. But there is really a lot of evidence. So this list contains evidence-based strategies, and mindfulness is an evidence-based strategy. And that's really what I'm going to share with you today about mindfulness. It has been a guiding light for me in my personal life, and it's been a guiding light for me in my professional life. And perhaps some of you already practice mindfulness, or it's a tool in your lives. And maybe some of you have never heard of it before. So I'm just going to kind of go over my sort of how I see it as a guiding light, and how it can be used to really help anxiety and depression and substance abuse. There's actually a program developed at University of Washington where they're using mindfulness to help people in recovery. So it can be used to help us with all 3 of these areas. So what exactly is mindfulness? There's a lot of different definitions, and it is an ancient practice that's been embraced by many cultures around the world for thousands of years. And the definition that I'm going to share with you today was written by Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's actually a molecular biologist from MIT, who then in the 1970s started working at University of Massachusetts Medical Center. And he, in his life outside of work, he meditated. And he found great, great benefits to this. And he began to notice that the people in his life that he felt were most resilient were those who practiced mindful meditation. And that was even, here he is at this medical center working with many doctors and healthcare providers. And he really felt like a lot of the people outside of that system that did practice meditation were far more resilient. And he decided he wanted to bring mindfulness to the patients. And so he developed a class that really taught this in a more secular way, it's associated with many different religions, but he, really sort of boiled it down to really what he feels that mindful meditation is about without religion. And he developed this 8-week class, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, and he taught it to patients at UMass. And also, this was the very beginning of the research. Before this, there hadn't been any research done on mindfulness, but he asked all the doctors to send him people who were in chronic pain, to send him patients that they had given up on, that patients who had all the medication they could have had, all the surgeries they could have, but were still in pain. And the doctor sent him, hundreds of patients, and people reported feeling better when they learned mindfulness, and they dropped their medications or reduced how much they were taking, many of them. And these were the early studies that have now led into, there's a tremendous amount of research happening all over the world now on mindfulness. I'll share a little bit with you today. But John Kabat-Zinn's definition is that mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So paying attention, what should we be paying attention to? And I have here a guiding light of things that we could bring our attention to that can help us. We can pay attention to our thoughts, to our body, to our emotions, to our behavior, and to cultivating a heart-centered existence. So I'm going to actually kind of walk us through this star, this guiding light today, and share how we bring attention to these different pieces and how this can help us. So let's begin with our thoughts. This image here, I don't know who drew this, but it's one of my favorite images that I feel like really kind of shares to me what mindfulness is about. We've got two people here walking toward 4 trees and a sun. The person on the left, has a lot going on in their mind, right? Maybe they're thinking about the election results, or the pandemic, or climate change, or all of these things, right, that we think about. And their eyes are open, probably, and they can hear, maybe, right? But they are not taking in what is right in front of them. They're actually missing it. Whereas the person on the right is seeing 4 trees and a sun. And they are, probably hearing the birds chirping and feeling the warmth of the sun on their skin. So they're 2 people in the exact same environment, but one of them has their mind full and the other one is mindful. And this is not just an experience in our minds that we can have. This actually sets about a whole cascade of events in our body when we are maybe in the space of the person on the left with just so many thoughts on our mind, and many of them stressful, which, by the way, I've spent most of my life there. That's I think growing up, and for a lot of my life before I learned more mindfulness, that's really where I lived, with just all of the stressors in my mind. I still have many stressors a day, but now that I know mindfulness, I have the tools to actually shift myself to be more like the person on the right when I realize that things are getting away from me. And I ask myself many times a day, and I encourage you to do the same. I ask myself, are my thoughts serving me? Are my thoughts serving me? And usually my answer is no. Usually the things I'm thinking about are not serving me. There's times when it does, when we had Thanksgiving, and we decided to eat out on the front lawn and set up one extra big table far away from us where my uncles could join us. And we set up we did a lot of planning. Their table was actually over 20 feet away from us. And everything was set up for them before they got there. And they came and joined us, and they ate and stayed and visited, and then they left. And my thoughts were not in the moment when I was planning for them to come. So was that serving me? Yes, because it allowed us to have a safe Thanksgiving together. But when I'm maybe just reading, like watching the news for hours and getting scared that I'm going to get sick and everyone I love is going to get sick. Is that serving me? I mean, some fear can be helpful, but when it's just going on and on, it's not serving me anymore. And that's when I now am able to kind of interrupt that. And one last slide on thoughts. One of my favorite studies in mindfulness has actually been done at Harvard. And they have been studying mind wandering and how that affects our happiness level. And they developed an app, and it's called Track Your Happiness. And thousands of people from all over the world, very diverse population, different age groups, different racial and ethnic groups, religions, everything, have enrolled in this study. And they ping people at various times of the day, and they ask 3 questions. One is, how do you feel right now? So people rate are they feeling very bad to very good? Then they ask, what are you doing? Are you working or doing housework? So people check that. And then, are you thinking about something other than what you're currently doing? And either people say, no, I'm thinking about what I'm doing, or they say that their mind has wandered. And if their mind wandered, they're asked, did it go to someplace unpleasant or pleasant or neutral? So that's the kind of data they collect. They have so much data that they can now really work with and start to see trends. And one of the things they found is that almost 50% of the time, people's minds are on something other than what they're doing. So kind of like you saw in that image before, right? Maybe they're walking in the park, but they're not really at the park. Their body is, but their mind isn't, right? Or they're doing their chores, but their mind is someplace else. So, I mean, almost 50% of the time, we are not where we are. Our mind is somewhere else, which also means, this moment right now is the only moment we have to be alive in. And so when our mind is not here, we're actually not living this moment of our life, And so that's quite significant. But another amazing part to me about this study was, often people's minds go to unpleasant places, which I relate to. That's where mine usually goes, to worries or all the things I have to do and feeling stressed. And as I mentioned, this is not just in our heads, it really affects even our whole body. But even when people said that their minds went someplace pleasant, their happiness was rated higher on a whole when they crunched the numbers. People's happiness is highest when they're in the present moment, when their mind is on their task at hand, even compared to when people's minds are going to pleasant places. Their minds are happier, or their emotions are happier when they're on their task at hand, even if it's a boring task, like driving in traffic or doing the chores. People still rate their levels of happiness highest when they're in the present moment. And there's actually a TED Talk on this, and Matt Killingsworth, one of the researchers, says, if mind wandering were a slot machine, we would never want to play. It's really not serving us for our minds to go to different places very often. So I just find that very interesting. Okay, so back to our guiding light, we can also bring our attention to our body. I've mentioned already in previous slides that when these stressors are happening in our thoughts, right, it has this effect also on our body. I'm sure many of you know of the fight or flight response. And this is when a threat is like coming at us and we need to react. And that there's a whole lot of things that happen in our body. So for instance, if a car's coming at you, right, you need to get out of the way, right? Your heart is beating faster. Your blood is going to your muscles. Your breathing changes, right, to help you get out of the way, to flee that situation. Or there might be times where you need There's where you need to fight instead of flee, and you can feel this adrenaline in the body. So this is a part of our survival, and it's like a very important response that we all have access to. But the problem is our fight or flight is actually turned on almost all the time if our thoughts are filled with stressful thoughts. Robert Sapolsky is a professor at Stanford, and he wrote the book, I hope I'm saying it right, but like Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, right? And it's really like about how like wild animals, like their stress response kicks in with when they need it. When the zebra is being chased by a lion and about to get eaten, like all of these things are happening in their body, but once that threat has passed, that zebra is like grazing in the savannah, like just getting their meal and relaxed. Whereas for human beings, this ability that we have to think actually kicks our fight or flight in sometimes on a chronic basis. And so it's not just in our minds that these stressors are existing. This whole list of things might be happening in our body. And when we are in this place for long periods of time, there are health impacts that we can start to experience from the stressors. So, but something pretty amazing, I think, is that our bodies don't have to just be a passive recipient of stress. They actually can be used if we tap into our bodies and pay attention to our senses in a particular way. We can actually use our bodies to counter stress. And so I'd like to invite you, if you like, to participate in an exercise with me right now, a mindfulness exercise where we can do this. We can use our bodies to actually help ourselves. So all of our bodies are here right now, wherever you happen to be. But as I mentioned before, your mind can be anywhere. So let's use our senses to really bring our full body right here. And we can begin with our sense of sight. And so, I invite you to maybe even shift your attention away from the computer right now and really just look around the space that you're in. Just noticing, you might notice the shapes, colors, lighting. Really noticing your surroundings and doing so without judgment. Just seeing what is there, maybe seeing the space as if for the very first time. And now shifting your attention to your sense of hearing. And it might help to bring your gaze downward or close your eyes. And see if you can notice sounds far away and sounds nearby. And now bringing your attention to your body and your sense of touch. So you might notice the points of contact that your body is making with your seat or the floor. You might feel the air on your skin or notice any other bodily sensations. And now taking a few moments to focus on your breath. No need to change your breathing in any way. Just noticing the sensations in your nose or your mouth as you inhale and exhale. Again and again. And if your mind wanders, just noticing that it did and gently guiding it back to your breath. And finally, noticing how you feel, how it was to ground yourself in the present moment through your body. Maybe you found it challenging to keep your mind from wandering. Perhaps instead it was relaxing. Some people think they should achieve a particular state and they feel concerned when they do not. But to quote Jon Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness is not about getting anywhere else. It's about being where you are and knowing it. So when you're ready, you can bring your attention back to the presentation, and we can move now back to the guiding light of mindfulness. We can also pay attention to our emotions. So, when we pay attention to our emotions, we might notice a tendency to gravitate away from anything that we consider to be unpleasant, right? Like sadness, right? Or fear or anger, and to gravitate toward those that we consider to be pleasant emotions, such as like happy or relaxed. And we might even distract ourselves from difficult emotions through a variety of methods, whether it be work or food or substances or gadgets. Yet it really is the very act of turning toward our unpleasant emotions that, rather than away from them, that pave the way for us to feel better. So when there's some studies at UCLA that are looking at something called affect labeling. And affect labeling means when we put words, either spoken or written, when we put words to our difficult emotions, that this helps us not only in the moment, but even in the long term. And it's so simple. And it was something I forgot to mention too. I didn't put it in my bio, but for the past 10 years, I've also taught mindfulness to preschoolers through high schoolers in the classrooms. And, a lot of our teachings is around, we are emotional beings. We have so many emotions throughout the day, right? And to be able to meet those and call them, with the kids, we start with just naming our emotions, just saying, I feel angry, right? I feel sad, right? And knowing that it's okay to have these feelings rather than just immediately feeling them, noticing they don't feel good, and then reaching for something to distract us or replace that feeling. I think it's really sitting with it. And this research at UCLA is actually with adults and showing that when we give a name to our feelings, again, verbally or in writing, it actually has an effect on our brain. And our brain begins to process things in ways that help us to feel better. So I actually read the kids a book called Visiting Emotions, and it's about all these different feelings that might come to their house, their body, right, and show up. And it's like, what does this emotion look like? What color is it? What kind of animal is it like? What might it sound like? And some are, positive, more whatever we might consider positive emotions, some more challenging ones. And then I ask the kids at the end of the book, so if there was, this is called it's called Visiting Feelings. So I say, well, if there's a knock on the door and you open it up and there's a feeling and it's happiness, what should you do? And they unanimously say, invite it in, or let that feeling in. And so then I ask, like, well, what if there's a knock and you open it up and it's sadness, or anger? And there's always a large group of kids that will say, close the door, don't let it in. Even though we just read a book that the whole book was about visiting feelings and sitting with them. And I think that we do get messages from childhood on up to push those bad feelings away. I don't know about all of you, but I feel like when I actually let myself go into the negative feelings, that I do start to feel better. I'm not ashamed to admit I've had a couple good cries throughout this past year when things just built up and I just, have sat and, let myself sob. And that has honestly been the best medicine, right? better than the pint of ice cream, right? Better than, turning on Netflix to try to get away from it. Not that I haven't done those things too, because believe me, I have. But I think truly my best medicine is crying when I'm sad and calling it what it is, right? So, okay, on to the next. And this is actually one of my favorite she's not a new poet, but I discovered her a few years ago, Danna Faulds. I love her poetry, but this one, which really to me speaks to our emotional lives, is called Allow. There is no controlling life. Try corralling a lightning bolt, containing a tornado. Dam a stream, and it will create a new channel. Resist, and the tide will sweep you off your feet. Allow, and grace will carry you to higher ground. The only safety lies in letting it all in, the wild and the weak, fear, fantasies, failures, and success. When loss rips off the doors of the heart, or sadness veils your vision with despair, practice becomes simply bearing the truth. In the choice to let go of your known way of being, the whole world is revealed to your new eyes. So practice becomes simply bearing the truth. Back to our star, we can also be mindful of our behavior. And an interesting thing I have learned a while ago, we live in this culture that just really, I think, praises and encourages us to be multitaskers. But, the studies and research are showing that we don't multitask well. In fact, they don't even call it multitasking. The research calls it task switching. So we don't do two things at once. We switch back and forth between two or three. And when the research is looking at performance, how do we do on all of those tasks? When we're trying to do more than one thing at once, we do it less well. So the outcomes are worse. And so a huge thing I've been working on in my life to try to reduce stress is monotasking. Just doing one thing at a time, right? And just kind of trying to stay with that. So if I'm responding to emails, I really try to shut everything else down. Or if I'm working on a document, I try to really, turn my email notifications off. Or if I'm with my son, I try to be present with him, right? I'm sure you've all been in conversations with people where you knew that person on the other end was distracted, that they weren't thinking about what you were saying, and you can feel that. And then you've also probably all been in conversations with people where they were very present and you felt heard, right? So when we practice mindfulness and bring our full attention, this quality of attention to everything, it can affect our work, our performance, our relationships. And I recently actually went through a lot of applications because I have a new assistant, and I can't tell you how many cover letters told me that the person applying was a great multitasker. And I was laughing because I was like, well, I'm looking for a monotasker. So staying on this topic of behavior, but kind of shifting gears here. So we can also bring our full attention to really any task that we're doing, anything that we're doing, right? Remember the Harvard study asked, is your mind on your task at hand or has it wandered? So let's just take hand washing, for instance, right? Something that's always been important, but has actually gained increasing attention during this pandemic. So, and there's so much I could say about this, but I actually wrote this I wrote this meditation almost 10 years ago when I was working in the schools, and I was noticing that the kids, their bathrooms were actually, some of the bathrooms were right off the classrooms. And so these like kindergartners would go into the bathroom and the toilet would be flushing and they'd be walking out while it's flushing, which clearly they're not washing their hands, right? If it's like still flushing as they're walking out. And, and also, right, these illnesses go like through the schools, especially in the fall, everyone's getting sick. And so every fall I would start off the mindfulness classes with a mindful hand washing meditation. And by the way, we used this also years later. I did research on mindfulness in the workplace, and we were working with nurses at UCI Medical Center, and we taught them this exact meditation. And think about hospitals and infection control, right? Infection control is a huge problem in hospitals. And some of the research there has looked at, well, what is happening? Are healthcare workers not washing their hands? Is that why this is happening? But in the studies that were done, they actually found, they are washing their hands. They're just not washing them properly. They're not washing them. And so I'm sure you've heard the like, oh, just sing happy birthday twice, right? But I'm going to walk you through a mindful hand washing, which is not just about singing happy birthday twice. So I invite you to pretend with me. Since we're not all standing in front of a sink right now. Let's pretend like you are, whatever sink you use most. And go ahead and, turn your water on, right? And put your hands under the water. And with mindfulness, you would actually feel the water running over your hands, and you might notice the temperature. And then, start to get some soap and start to, make a lather. And then the kids also remind me, they say not to let the water run because that's wasteful. So we can turn the water off and really begin to make a lather. And I ask the kids in the classroom, I say, well, show me how you make a lather. And a lot of them start like this, right? But I say, well, what is our intention right now? Our intention is to get the germs. So do we stay here? Then they'll start, okay, well, if I'm trying to get the germs, I should go here. So I'll say, oh, I notice people are going between their fingers. And then okay, now we are going to the back of our hands because germs can be there, right? And even under our nails and even our wrists. We're now washing with attention and intention to get the germs. And we can also do this with something called hurtfulness. And so we can say to ourselves, I am taking care of myself, and I am taking care of my community. And then when we're all done, we can turn that water back on and feel the soap suds wash away. We can watch them go down the drain, dry our hands. We might even smell and smell our clean hands. This is using our body to ground ourselves in the moment, right? And so hand washing like this, actually, there is now a study on using mindfulness with hand washing and finding that it increases our hand hygiene, which is really the whole reason we were doing it to begin with. Compare that to how people usually wash their hands. As I mentioned, some of the kids don't, and then also when we do, how do we usually wash our hands? We go to the sink and just do it very quickly because our mind is already onto the next thing that we need to do, right? But we can actually let hand washing be a meditation. And the nurses that we taught this to, they actually talked a lot about this meditation and how in the hospital and these busy, crazy times, for them to have a moment to step up to the sink and just do something for themselves and their patients still and their coworkers. But it was they realized that they could actually, it was a very calming time for them in the day that they could do many times a day. And the last thing I'll say about this is in a first grade class that I went into to teach mindfulness, before we got started, one of the little girls said, Miss Jessica, at snack, I ate my banana mindfully. I looked at it and noticed the colors, and I smelled it, and I chewed it really slowly and tasted and noticed the texture, because we do mindful eating in our class too. And I was like, that is great. And another one said, Miss Jessica, last night I couldn't sleep, and I just paid attention to my breath, just kept bringing my mind back to my breath, and it helped me fall asleep last night. And I was like, that's great. And then my favorite is this little boy stood up and he looked at the whole class and he said, you know, any moment in your life, you could be checked out or you could be there for it. And he said, you could even take a mindful poop. And I was like, you get an A plus. So, you know, he's in first grade. We've been practicing mindfulness, mindful eating, mindful breathing, mindful walking, mindful hand washing. But he understands that any time in his life, he might be there or he might not. And that's true for all of us. So anyway, out of the mouths of babes. Returning to our guiding light, we can also cultivate a heart-centered existence. So this character actually means mindfulness, and it's made up of two characters. Actually, it's made up, the top is presence and the bottom is heart. So really mindfulness it's not just paying attention, right? It's not just about that, it's about doing so with heart, right? Just like in the hand washing meditation, where it wasn't only about paying attention, it was doing so with love for ourselves, with care for our community, right? This changes things when we cultivate that. And there are actually, I mentioned that John Kabat-Zinn developed something I forgot to mention. So he developed this class at UMass, and the class he developed is called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, or MBSR. Over 25,000 people have taken his class at UMass, and many have done teacher trainings, and it's taught all over the world. And it's also taught at UC Irvine. And then about, I don't know, I should know the exact dates, but about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, also coming out of these mindfulness classes and these mindfulness circles, a researcher named Kristen Neff and also Christopher Germer have really started to delve more into the self-compassion piece and do research on it, and develop a class called Mindful Self-Compassion, which I took about a year and a half ago at UC Irvine, and it was amazing. It was a class where we really learned many, many different practices to meet our own suffering in new ways. And I mean, I've been teaching mindfulness for, like I said, a decade to kids, and I oversee these programs for adults. And it was life-changing for me to take this self-compassion class and to learn these incredible skills. And they actually tap into what's called the mammalian caregiving system. So, if you watch like mammals, like even like in the wild, and how they care for their young, they do so with touch, with vocalizations, and humans do this as well, right? When a baby's crying, like people pick up a baby and speak to them in certain ways. We know this, we've witnessed this, right? But what this class actually teaches you is how to do this to yourself. Because we really haven't been taught that, have we? We look to others to give us that comfort, often, or many of us do, but we can actually give it to ourselves. And so I'm just going to give you an example. And if you'd like to go through this, you can, of something called a self-compassion break. So if you'd like, you can close your eyes or bring your gaze downward, and really take a few moments to recall a recent time that you have experienced stress. And no doubt there's probably many moments of stress for all of us these past several months. And maybe rather than picking one that's extremely stressful, select one that brings up a moderate amount of stress, just so that it's not overwhelming right now. There might be a lot of stressful moments competing for your attention, but see if you can kind of focus in on one. And once you have this in mind, let's see if we can meet this experience with self-compassion. And the first step is just acknowledging that we are experiencing a moment of suffering. So you might say something to yourself like, this is a moment of suffering. And the second step is really recognizing our common humanity with statements such as, suffering is a part of life, or I am not alone. And it's not to minimize our suffering, it's actually to connect our suffering to universal suffering, to the fact that we as human beings suffer, and we are not alone when we're suffering. And next, we can incorporate gentle touch. So you might want to place your hands over your heart, or on your cheeks, or your arms, or your belly, or your legs, wherever, and you can experiment with this later on, finding a place on your body that it feels comforting to touch yourself, and noticing your own gentle touch. And finally, offering supportive messages to ourselves, such as, may I learn to accept what I cannot change, or may I be kind to myself. May I be kind to myself. Or any other words that you might say to yourself that would bring you comfort. And noticing how you feel. And when you're ready, opening your eyes if they're closed. And I think, what they're finding actually they're doing research on this. When we bring touch to ourselves, our cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone, actually can decrease by just touching ourselves. And our oxytocin, which is our love hormone, or that's what it's called, can rise. So these are not only like, oh, this feels good. It literally, there's like science behind this. There are changes in our body when we speak to ourselves with kindness or bring kindness to ourselves. And, a big part of this class, the place that it begins, is actually looking at also in a stressful situation, how do we speak to ourselves? What kind of self-talk do we have? And if a dear friend was in the exact same situation and came to us and they were facing this stressor, how would we treat our friend? And there's huge differences in how we speak to ourselves and how we speak to our friend. And this class is really about learning to meet our own suffering in the same way we would treat a dear friend. And it's really very liberating to learn these skills. So just our summary star here, our guiding light of mindfulness, that, really when we pay attention to our thoughts, to our body, to our emotions, to our behavior, and to cultivating a heart-centered existence, we are utilizing evidence-based mindfulness practices to nurture our well-being. And really this guiding light lies within each of us, and it can shine bright even in the midst of these dark times. The only thing that is needed is a practice that consists of paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So I want to end with just sharing, this is the future site of the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute. Our current site, We have mini clinics. We have one in Costa Mesa, Yorba Linda, Newport Beach, but we're doing a lot of virtual services, telehealth, and mindfulness classes. And but this building is actually currently under construction on the UC Irvine campus. This is the College of Health Sciences connected to the School of Nursing, and our institute will be here. It'll be done, I think, in about a year and a half or so. These are just a sample of the clinical resources that we offer at the Samueli Institute. We do nutrition, pain management, acupuncture, massage therapy, integrative cardiology, naturopathic medicine, and biofeedback. And we also have recently rolled out yoga therapy. And yoga therapists have actually 5 times the amount of training as yoga instructors, and they're really trained to treat specific health conditions. So we do one-on-one yoga therapy, and we also have group classes. By the way, I will send an email with links about these things if any of you are interested. I will make sure to get this information to you. And then we have virtual mindfulness classes. Typically they're in person, but right now they're virtual. We offer mindfulness-based stress reduction in BSR, which is the class that John Kabat-Zinn developed. The self-compassion class, we're just about to put one on the books for March. We do teen programs, parenting. We do a relapse prevention program. We also have free weekday drop-in live stream meditations for the community. So that's Monday through Friday. And I'll send that to you. We do 25-minute meditations a day, and people come. And actually, I would say that I think it's been more the mature population who's been coming to these meditations. And I haven't been at all of them, but I was at a lot in the beginning. And you can have your camera off, you can have it on. Usually there's like a hello at the beginning from the instructor, and people can say hi if they want, and maybe a minute or 2 at the end to sort of debrief together. I've heard a lot of people talk about missing their grandkids, missing holding their grandchildren, and other people saying, I do too, I miss that too, and sharing the suffering together, and supporting one another. So please come join us. We would love to have you. We also have an amazing new program, and I put this on here too because we're doing a free talk about this class tonight at 5:30. Miriam Luth is a mindfulness instructor who also does a lot around connecting mindfulness and to nature. And she's going to be teaching a class. It's like a 3-session class on Saturdays, where normally it might be done in person and people would meet outside, but and maybe even in like at a nature center nearby. But she's doing these virtually, and we did it for our staff where we were all at home, and you could either be inside near a plant, or I went out in like my neighbor's yard, and some people go on a balcony, and she walked us through connecting meditations with like the natural world around us, and it was beautiful. So she's giving a talk from 5:30 to 6:30 tonight about this, and then her class is coming up in about 10 days or so. So I just wanted to mention that. Here's our website if you're feeling like going on and looking at this soon, but I will get an email over real quickly with more information. And now moving into, let's see, it looks like we're a little after 10 o'clock, but I know sometimes you stay on later from what I hear. So I'm open to questions or open to discussion, whatever would be most helpful to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that talk, Doctor. So we do have some comments in the chat room, but first they want to know, where do they find the links to the classes that you mentioned? Is that at the website you were just showing?
Yeah, it's at the website. And if you go to our website, it's funny, we've been changing it, so I want to make sure. At the very top, there's a bar there, it says classes. And then you click on mindfulness classes, although they're changing that name to community. So if it either says classes or community, but you go to it's ssihi.uci.edu right there. That's the website, and then click on classes and mindfulness. And the yoga, there's also yoga therapy under there too.
Okay, so we have a question from Robert Moreno. If you'd like to ask your question, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, thanks so much. What a great presentation. I really appreciated everything, and I loved the Allow poem. It's just beautiful. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the website, the SSIHI, to access information. You also mentioned you're going to send us some information by email. Do you have our emails? That's one question I have.
That's a great question. I was going to send it to the organizers, who've been, to Bill and so that they can pass it along to you.
Yeah, we don't have the emails for all of our guests who have signed in as guests, so we wouldn't be able to pass that on. But
well, that makes sense. That's a great question. So really, all of our information is on our website. The classes, the mindfulness and yoga classes, are under that link, and the free live streams. I'm going to tell you all the easiest way to get to our free live streams. When you go to our website, the first thing that comes up, there's a banner, there's a big picture that kind of ends up moving to other pictures. And the very first one has a man who has his eyes closed. And it says free live stream meditations. And you click there and you register and get the link. And the link is the same every single day. So these are Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon. And they're Tuesday and Thursday at 5 p.m. They're 25-minute meditations. But just the very front page of our website, the top banner is how you register for those live streams.
Thank you so much. Just another quick question also, and forgive me for taking the time, but
no.
Is this presentation that you just made, is that available for review? I mean, can we access that again? Is it on record somehow?
The answer to that is yes. This presentation is being recorded and it will be on the OLLI distance learning website. If you go to the OLLI website, which is olli.fullerton.edu, there'll be a link for distance learning, and you could go there, and it usually takes about a week to 2 weeks to be posted. But if you look there, it'll be there in a few weeks.
Excellent. Thank you. My last question is, could you give me the name of those two authors that you, or teachers that, let me turn this off. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry. No problem.
The name of the two people that you went to for the mindful self-compassion class, I've heard their names before and I never wrote them down. Could you give that to me?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So I did not take the class. So Kristen Neff, which is Neff, there's what I would do is actually also, there's a whole mindful self-compassion website. So I would Google Center for Mindful Self-Compassion because you can read a lot about them. But Kristen Neff, Neff, and then Chris Germer, Germer.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I think I heard a podcast by them that was just really good.
Yeah.
Thanks again. Just a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Okay, if anyone else has any questions, can you raise your Zoom hand either off the participants list or on the reactions button? And we'll let you ask your question. If you can't find your hand, go to the participants list and click on yes, and I'll know that's what you're trying to do. Or you could type it into the chat window and I'll read the question off for you. But William and Marianne Clark, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to thank you for a really topical and just a great presentation. we enjoyed that. We teach a course called Mastering Retirement in OLLI, and one of the things we talk about with our students is the idea of having an experience toolbox. And we point out that when we reach 65 plus in years, we've experienced marriage, divorce, several job changes, the stress of a career. And we talk about how retirement is actually a life-changing experience and that it requires adjustment. But it's helpful to just remind older people that you've been through practically everything. And I think that contributes in a lot of ways to the ability of older people to have resilience in the overwhelming kinds of changes that are happening at this point in our lives. I know for myself, I'm just curious, I'm a planner. And so what I tend to do is prepare for earthquakes and prepare for political change and all of these things that I just feel so overwhelmed with trying to plan for the next event and the uncertainty of all of that. So I don't know what your recommendation is for that. It's helpful to be able to, to have tools available to cope with change, but sometimes it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think, planning is an incredible skill to have, and we need that to be prepared for these big changes that are coming. And so, I would go back to, that question that I asked earlier is like for you, encouraging you to ask yourself, like, are my thoughts serving me? Or is my planning serving me right now? Have I planned enough? Do I feel like I've really sort of done the planning I can? Is it helping me to stay here? Or what's happening in my body when I'm planning for hours, right? Am I feeling relaxed and better and relieved, or am I starting to feel just more stressed? And I would also say, if you can counter that with I don't know if you do practice, or if you haven't, if you would try it, to try some meditation and notice okay, if I join this free live stream and sit for 25 minutes and, put on get an app that helps me meditate or do some self-compassion, do I feel different right now? And just really letting your body guide you to what's feeling best.
Great.
So John Kabat-Zinn says, we're called human, sorry, I quote him all the time, but he's just, to me, so great. But he says, we're called human beings, but we might as well call ourselves human doings, because we're not being, we are always doing. And I think in our culture, we haven't been taught how to be in the moment, how to stop and tend to ourselves. And so he says, if these are our two muscles, if this is our doing muscle and this is our being muscle, for most of us in the United States, this doing muscle, this planning and analyzing and, working is like Popeye. It's like this gigantic muscle, because all day long we're just doing, right? And we really need to work out. We need to do both of them. We need to stop also and be. And I think this is where you're going to feel yourself. This is the muscle that's going to it's going to take care of you.
I'll try that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you also for your comments about the resilience in the mature population and what.
Yeah, I think it's Laura Cardison from the Stanford Center on Longevity is a good source for that.
Oh, that's great. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions? I don't see any more hands right now. but I do have a question.
Yeah.
I just recently retired, and I was in the opposite side. I was more reactive in my career, reacting to events that would pop up. So when I tried to sit down and be mindful and meditate, my mind would always do that for just a few minutes, and then it wants to jump and start thinking about the next problem I need to be working on. How do I keep myself doing? Is it just every day I have to go a little bit longer so I could go through a whole period of time when I could be mindful? Or because
keep going. Sorry, I'm interrupting. Go ahead.
That's okay. But it's just my mind keeps jumping. How do I bring it back?
I would say that you're doing the work when you even notice that your mind is jumping. So I think people do think that they that if we're going to meditate or do mindfulness, that there's a feeling of like, wait, I can't just sit here without any thoughts in my mind for 5 minutes or 1 minute, right? And
right.
And the fact is actually most of us can't. Most of us cannot sit without thoughts. So you're not doing it wrong. The fact that and by the way, I know I didn't really go into, but meditation might be that there's this point of focus that you for a lot of practices, it could be the breath, but it can be sound. It can be different things where, we're trying to focus on the breath and we notice our mind wandering. I'm just saying that for anyone who hasn't meditated. And then our mind wanders and I start thinking like, oh my gosh, what am I going to make for dinner tonight, right? And then I bring it back to the breath and then my mind wanders again. Well, actually, meditation isn't having a blank mind. It's exactly what was happening for you. It is that it goes away and you come back, and then you go away again and you come back. And then inevitably, you will go away again and you come back. And mindful meditation to me, every time, that being muscle I was talking about, every time your mind goes away and you bring it back, that's the exercise. That's the work. It's not staying here forever and not going away. It's that you go away because that's what our minds do. And you notice you did, and then you come back to the breath. And that's what builds the muscle of presence, of being in the present moment. Before I learned mindfulness, my mind would go away and I would just go wherever my mind went for all day long. I didn't know I could come back. So I would say to expect your mind to wander for all of us when we do practice mindfulness. If your mind wanders 100 times, then all you do is you try to bring it back 100 times. And that is a fabulous meditation. It's not that your mind didn't wander. That's not what makes it a good one. It's that it did, and you tried to bring it back.
Okay, thank you. So, Robert, you have another question?
Actually, a comment to the last gentleman that was just talking. I would share that 3 years ago, I had read a book that's called 8-Minute Meditation, and it basically challenged me to do meditation 8 minutes a day for 2 months. And I thought to myself, well, okay, at least it gives me a structure to figure out what this is all about. And it was a little confusing from one week to the next, but I really got a lot out of it. It taught me on my own time and in my own terms how to practice it in a very simple fashion. And to this day, the breathing has helped me to sleep so much better than I ever have before. So I would share that book with the gentleman that was just talking a little while ago. If you want some way of just kind of jumping into this thing and experimenting in a very simple fashion, it's called 8-Minute Meditation by Davich, Davich.
That's great. 8 minutes, right? No matter how busy we are, I think we could probably all find 8 minutes a day to give it a try.
Okay, Saeed?
Yes. First of all, I just want to thank you for a wonderful presentation. It was just awesome. A lot of good information. I just want to follow up, just to build what just the previous question he had about mindfulness, and it was great what you just indicated, that you constantly need to bring back your into present, something that your mind will wander no matter what you do. But, what I deal with sometimes is I try to do that, but then I say, well, when do you know? I mean, some of your thoughts, you do want to cherish thoughts that are productive and that you do want. I guess that's something I struggle with. How do you evaluate what thoughts you should cherish and go on with it, and not to be in the present, because you do want to have plan your life, things. That's something I kind of struggle with. Just point a few things. How do you recognize, to be more recognize the good thoughts that you want to embrace?
Exactly. That's a great question. And because I think, in my mind, I'll just speak from personal experience, right? My goal isn't to always be in the present moment, to stop any thoughts about the past or the future, right? I think it's more, what I've learned is that before I learned how to be in the present moment, my thoughts were rarely there. And they were all over the place, and they were really affecting me with that. And now, there are times where I cherish. I've lost both of my parents, and I don't want to always be in the present moment, because then I can't remember them if I don't have that time to recall. And so I do let myself, do that and cherish those memories. And I think we all need to do that. Memories can be so they're so important and can bring so much, joy to us. I heard someone giving a talk, a researcher, and she was talking about mind wandering, and that she said it's more that when you learn, you might choose to mind wander. You might consciously say, I'm going to mind wander. I'm going to, I'm noticing I'm cherishing memories, and I want to stay here. This feels good to me, right?
Sure.
And that's where my question about, are my thoughts serving me? So if I'm cherishing memories and it feels good, then that's serving me, right? But if I'm maybe going over a memory, a traumatic memory over and over and over, and it's at some point, maybe I've done it, but it's not serving me anymore, then I can use mindfulness to bring my attention back to the present moment.
So, that's great. Great comment. But so, do you really want to, if it's positive thoughts, whether it's planning for the future or in the moment, do you want to allocate any kind of a time to that, or just let it go? Just if you think it's a good thought, you just you don't need to bring yourself back to present in any kind of a time frame, right? That's how
I operate. I don't necessarily designate I need to be. I think what drives me more is just really saying, is this serving me where I am right now? Is this helping me? Is this enhancing my life? And as I said before, usually my answer is no. This place I go to, right? That the world is falling apart and my life is falling apart and my family's life is this place I can go to so easily. Often it's not helping me. And I catch that. I say, why is it? And then I bring myself back. But when your thoughts are somewhere and they're bringing you pleasure and joy, then I say, stay there.
Sure. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have time for one more question, and Ethel, please go ahead.
Thank you. Again, thank you, and excellent information and presentation, Jessica. I taught adult students in adult education for my career in the community college system, and I wish I had known about mindfulness there were some strategies that I worked with my students on with study skills that now that I look back, there were a couple that really were kind of related. And many of my students were struggling with multitudes of issues, not having finished a basic education, and therefore sometimes being underemployed or unemployed, and just a lot of circumstantial situations. And many times they were coming to school with all of those, as all of us do. We carry these things around. And something I had read as a study skill was to write down, have a little notebook or whatever. Now a person could just on their phone, of course, make notes. And I said, try to put those important things someplace that they'll be there for you. And it was sort of a tool to help them clear their mind. Now that I know a little bit about mindfulness, I think that's what it was trying to do. To not say that it's not still important, the crisis is still there. I said, if it's an emergency, yes, of course, you must, that has to take precedent. But and I said, and I have to try to do the same thing, is keep, okay, I'm going to put this here. It's not going to go away. I won't lose it, but I'm not going to deal with it now because I need to be present and focus. And I could see the difficulty for them to make any progress if their minds were constantly mulling over life. And it's certainly not easy, but I have found the breathing or some focus to be very, very effective. And again, for sleep, I'll get up in the night and I have a 5-minute, it's actually a mindful breathing little thing that I found a few months ago. And I will listen to it once, maybe twice, and never more than that. And I'm back to sleep.
That's amazing. And
so it's the strategies, but I look at it as another skill. It's obviously another skill that I have to learn. And I have to learn what's best, what works for me, and which strategies seem to be effective, but I have to give them time, and I'm not always patient. So
and there are so many different strategies, and for some people the breathing is really helpful, and for others but focusing on the breath is not helpful, right? And so, like you're saying, finding what works for you, kind of experimenting. But so many people do report that it helps with sleep. I'm glad that you kind of are emphasizing that, because I'm sure we've all had some trouble sleeping, or many of us on the call have probably had trouble sleeping this last year, or maybe wake up at night. And, when our mind, this is how our mind can just take over. And then how do you get back to sleep when your mind is on that train of just constantly going and thinking of all the what ifs? But when you give this focus of attention of the breath, right? And then your mind will take over again, and then you come back to the breath and just keep coming back to the breath. It can be a very calming thing, and many people report improvements in sleep. So thank you, Ethel, for sharing that, and for all the tools that you gave to your students too that came to you. They were so lucky to have you as their teacher, being so aware of all
I was the lucky one. I was the fortunate one in many ways, but thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Drew DePaz. That was a very informative lecture, and I think a lot of people learned a little bit about it, and they could come to your website here and find out more. Okay, so
thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, our next lecture will be next Wednesday on January 20th at 7 p.m. and it'll be on living pain-free in your golden years. So thank you for attending, everyone, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.